delicious lunch and maybe spend some time outside. It certainly looks beautiful. But it's a little bit hot for us to do something here. My name is Janelle Beitz, and yes?
Janelle, I think you're using a microphone, which is better for those listening on streaming.
I don't know that either microphone?
The mic is.
It's everywhere.
Oh, okay.
My name is Janelle Beitz, and I am a research and instructional librarian at William Mitchell College of Law. And these are my colleagues who are going to introduce themselves.
Hi, I'm Chad Johnson. I'm the IT director at William Mitchell.
And I'm Dave Herding, the instructional designer at William Mitchell.
And what we're going to discuss today is the hybrid program at William Mitchell, the hybrid J.D. program, which has now completed its first full semester. And if you read the introduction, we're going to tell a story here, sort of like our speaker was saying yesterday in the keynote, only it's not really a linear story. If you'll see our sort of overall presentation here, it kind of is a scattered dust of things all over the place, because our main topics are how we designed, how we oriented, how we put out fires, and how we're planning for the future. And the roles that the three of us play at William Mitchell, they all overlap in each one of these parts, and each one of these activities overlapped with students, staff, faculty, technology, and instructional design. So I'm going to give a little bit of a background. Chad and I presented at Cali last year, and we had just hired Dave. Dave had started working for us for about 2 or 3 weeks when Cali occurred last year. And last year what we discussed was how William Mitchell obtained the ABA variants, how we picked our learning management system, which is Blackboard, and how we hired the instructional designer and what the role of the instructional designer was going to be. As a reminder, the J.D. program is half online, half in person. And the in-person weeks, the in-person time, it's half of the whole hours, their credit hours, but they consist of intensive weeks in St. Paul at William Mitchell. For example, the first semester, they came on campus for the very beginning of the program for the first week, which we called Prep Week. And then they were on campus at week 12 or 13? Week 13, which we called Capstone Week. And these weeks were very intensive, I don't know, 55, 65 hours of instruction. Capstone Week in particular was a simulation situation, so they were very intensive with a little bit of lecture, but mostly hands-on simulation work. So that is, additionally, the online part of the program is asynchronous. We do have some of our professors who were offering what they called office hours, which were live, but they were not required for the students to attend, although they were quite popular. And so in the future, we're going to do some more of them.
The faculty often recorded it so that people that couldn't attend would have the benefit of listening to what went on during those office hours. So.
Exactly. But for the most part, the program is asynchronous. And I should say too that, and I know you guys aren't shy, so maybe I don't have to say it, but feel free to stop and ask us questions, although we will give time at the end as well. So the first thing we're going to talk about is how we designed, and so I'm going to give it over to Dave.
Hi, I'm the instructional designer for William Mitchell, and I just want to start off and say I am not a lawyer. I don't need to brag, but I'm not. So I think that was part of the reason they hired me, from what I understand, is that I'm coming in kind of green to it. I'm coming in not under the good old boys network. I'm coming in not being acclimated to anything. And when they were interviewing me, they said, what are some things that you could implement for us that we're not doing? And so I decided upon 5 or 6 kind of non-negotiables that if I do this, I want to do these 5 or 6 things, not to you, but with you. And so I wrote them up on the board, and I kind of created an acronym. Anybody that's an instructional designer, you like stuff that's easy to remember, ABCD on the whiteboard there. And I kind of cheated. There'll be 2 things under A. I wanted to cram something in there. So I'm going to take you through ABCD on what we did to design the program. And these are things that I would hope some of you might already be doing, or maybe are doing in a different way, or if you're not doing them, maybe consider doing them. I've worked for one of the largest online universities. I've created a couple hundred courses, and these are things I've learned over the years that work and don't work, and so I just want to share them with you. So the first thing we want to talk about is this ADDIE model. Anybody ever hear of ADDIE? I mean, if you're a project manager, that's where it came out of, probably in the 70s. Software people kind of took it over in the 80s. Project management kind of began it, and it was kind of a linear model of how you project manage something. So when I came into William Mitchell, I said, I want to invoke this ADDIE model when we're creating courses. And I don't know if some of you can read this, and you can look it up when you get a chance too, but I said, first thing I want to do is I want to come in and I want to analyze some of your courses. Some of the things that law professors do, I mean, I know it's hard to believe, are pretty good. So why change what's good? So I wanted to come in and analyze some of these things, and then I said, let's start to design some of these things and make them a little bit better. Let's develop them. Let's develop some activities. And then now we're in the implementation stage where students have been through a semester. And now we're evaluating. We're going to tell you some of the things we didn't do very well, some of the things we did well. And then this circle is going to be constant. You're really never done. If you think, and if any of you think as instructional designers or educators that you're done, at some point you're kind of kidding yourself. The circle is always continuing. So that's the ADDIE model. That was one of the things I wanted to bring into it. And then my second thing, how many people know what andragogy is? Okay, maybe about a third of you. I'm doing a doctoral thesis on andragogy. That was another one of the things I wanted to bring in. I've been hearing pedagogy the whole time. I think that's the old way. Pedagogy is kind of that umbrella that people talk about teaching, but really, if you want to get technical, pedagogy is how to teach children. And one of the things I wanted to bring in was an andragogical method. And if you've not read up on this, Malcolm Knowles, he's kind of the founder of it, Knowles. Good guy to look up. Did this in the 70s, 80s, the father of andragogy. He thought there was 5 or 6 things that if you're teaching adults, that you should incorporate into your courses, because adults learn differently than students, or than children. And if you can't read these, I kind of wrote them down here. You can Google this. The best thing I've seen out there, there's a chart out there called the pedagogy chart in andragogy, and it shows versus andragogy, and I didn't put that one up here, the text was too small. But some of the things we wanted to incorporate is that if you're going to teach adults, you need to let them know why they're learning something. Remember, as a kid, the teacher would just get up and start talking, never told you why. I mean, I went through algebra class and I said, I'm never going to use this. They would tell me why. I still don't know why. And adults have experience that kids don't have. Why not build upon the experience that adults have? They have a context. They have life experience. Why not make activities that build on those type of things? Adults are more interested in things that are relevant to their work. If you can give an adult learner something they can go apply tomorrow, even if they're not a lawyer, if they're working at a grocery store or at an automotive place, something that they can use right away, that helps them. And problem-centered. In our courses, we try to create a lot of problem-centered discussions, problem-centered assignments. Adults like to solve problems. Give them a problem and let them work their way out. And then finally, adults are motivated inwardly. You know, a child, have you ever taught children, is you have to motivate them. 90%, 99% of the students that come, they're motivated. They're there to learn. We don't have to motivate them. They're already motivated. So that's kind of just some background of the andragogical principles. But if you're not familiar with it, if you just read some of the websites and literature on this that's out there, I mean, it will help your instructional design greatly if you can focus on an adult learner. And then, so that was A, and we're going to go to B. Any of you use backwards design, know what that means? A couple of you. There's a book out there, and when I meet with faculty, law faculty, I bring it, I call it my Bible, I bring it to them. It's called Understanding by Design. It's on Amazon for about 20 bucks. Wiggins and McTeague wrote it quite a few years ago. Backwards design basically is, and some of you have already talked about this, is where you start with, whoops, how do I go back? Where you start with the institutional learning outcomes, and you move, so we're designing backward, that's where we get the name of it. Then we go to the learning outcomes, then we go to the outcomes of the course, outcomes of the unit, and then outcomes of the lesson. So we design that way, and then we teach this way. And so when we're teaching, we start with the outcomes of the lesson, and we kind of start going back. But in the Understanding by Design book, they break it down into 3, and I even got lawyers to understand this, is that they're doing these things already in some sense. The 3 things for backwards design is that they have to know what your desired results are. You know, so you start with, what do you want your course to be? Most professors don't start with what they want the results to be. They want to start with, I've been teaching this for 20 years, I'm going to keep doing that. Don't start there with them. Start with the results. It's very uncomfortable for them at first to do this. The second stage is, what are the evidence? How are we going to know that students are doing this? You have results, you have evidence, and most professors will just say, well, because they passed the test. Well, that's not real good evidence. I mean, some people are just naturally good test takers. Some people aren't. And then the third step in backwards design, or understanding by design, is the lesson itself. And that's where instructors or professors want to start. Because I want to start with the lesson and just get up and start lecturing. And we have to take them backwards. And it's a learning curve for them. It's very uncomfortable. But I've brought in that book, and I've even given that book to some faculty, and I say, just read chapter 1. And it's a thin book. It's not very intimidating. And they read it, and they're like, why haven't I been doing this for 30 years? It's very easy and user-friendly. The C. So here's a typical, whoops. So I work with professors, and I sit down with them, and we call them SMEs. Anybody know the acronym, subject matter expert? And the lawyers like that. They like to be called an expert. You kind of stroke the ego a little bit. And you're an expert at this. I don't know anything about this. Tell me what you're teaching. And can I zoom in on that? There we go, a little bit. And so what they do is we call them competencies. Some people are calling them outcomes. So this is a typical competency sheet from Torts, I think it was. And so here's a competency up at the top that one of the professors says, that's what I want to do day 1. And I said, but can you accomplish that in day 1? No. What can you accomplish in day 1? Well, I can do these little things. These are called sub-competencies. And so in theory, if we do all these little things, they roll up into the big thing. And so for every course we created, we had 5 or 6 competencies, and then 5 or 6 sub-competencies that went underneath them. And if you do this stuff up front, again, backwards design, do this hard stuff up front, then these things become the unit objectives at some point, and they also become your formative activities. So you don't have to recreate those later. You let this drive everything else. So this becomes a formative activity. This becomes a formative activity. And then it all rolls up into eventually a summative activity, which might be a paper, an interview, something like that. And so that was the hardest thing to do with faculty is, let's get this on paper. Some of them had it, some of them didn't. Some of them had it in their head, some of them had 1 or 2 things. None of them had a full, they said, look at my syllabus, and some of them were not so good to look at. So we did this with each course. Everything had to have an alignment number. I'm going to talk about that in a little bit. So when they wanted to put something in the course, they would say, I want a discussion in Unit 4 on X. I said, is X any of these things? No. Then we can't put it in there. Well, I want to. Well, then we either have to create a new sub-competency to align to that, or we get to the end, and there's some of these that they didn't cover. So we either have to drop these things or add activities. You can't have activities without alignment. Otherwise, you're not following what you said you were going to do. So the part that worked well with them is we said, let's let this evolve while we're designing. If we have to add to this or delete from this, we can do it along the way. So it was always kind of evolving. It was never static until the very end. So that's C. And then we came up with something called the design document. And you can feel free to steal this. I borrowed it and modified it. But for every week of the course, so here's week 4, we put a title in. And here's the objectives for that week of the course. So we have 5 objectives, which are basically nothing more than sub-competencies. You see the 3.1, 3.3, 3.4. So we can see the alignment with the sub-competencies. This one aligns to competency 5, sub-competency 1. And so once they got those in place, now can you move everything over? We moved over to the right, and we said, okay, we have, this is what you wanted week 4. What are some things you want them to read or do? What are some things you want them to discuss? What are some things you want them to have an assignment? And then I would say to the faculty, what do they align with? Then these become our rubrics at some point. These are the 5 or 6 things that this assignment aligns with. The discussions align with those competencies. The activities align with those competencies. So when the ABA does come through at some point, or somebody does, and says, justify this reading, this assignment, this discussion, everything is in alignment. And then finally the rubric. We debated for weeks over this, how many columns. Have any of you had this fight with people? Some people want 10 columns, you know, almost good, not quite good, gray good. We came up with 4 things: proficient, needs improvement, non-performance, and distinguished. And then these are the criteria. And then again, notice the criteria align with the competence, or a competency or a subcompetency. And then this bottom one we decided to put in every course because we were hearing writing is terrible. And it's not just in law colleges, it's in a lot of colleges. Student writing is not very good.
I can't quite read it there. Do you have specifically tailored rubrics to each subcompetency, or is it a general one that you apply to all the subcompetencies?
Typically the rubrics, they don't go, if you can go to the left a little bit, you know, they don't go to us all of the subcompetencies. Like notice it, the first one will hit the first 1.2, the second one hits 2.1, this one. So these two are kind of under the same competency because they're kind of doing some things that are similar.
We had rubrics for every accessible thing that they did. There was a rubric for each discussion. The discussion board rubrics were all the same.
For all courses.
But all the other activities, the papers, those rubrics were a little bit different. Was that your question?
Yeah, that's exactly. Thank you.
Yeah, the discussion rubric we use for everything. So torts have the same one as criminal law. We'll have the same one as all the other ones. So I think that was my ABCD, was the ADDIE model, Andragogy, backwards design, competency driven, and then our design document, which leads to our rubrics.
And Chad is going to talk a little bit about designing the courses in the LMS system.
So we took and we worked in pretty much like within a group with each other to kind of go over and design how the design that that they brought up for these different courses would go into an LMS. Because so now they had the design, they had the competencies, we had to lay everything out. Part of what we had talked about within the LMS was trying to come up with a consistent style and standards within the LMS themselves. And we thought that this was important to do for the fact that for the students, it isn't a matter of trying to get them to learn how to also use another tool. We wanted them to focus on the material in the course. They had a lot to do. We don't want that to become like another thing. They had to learn how to get around in torts, and then also get around in criminal law and different things like that. We wanted some consistency. So once they got the layout of the course, they'd be able to figure out where they needed to go for each of the other courses.
Yeah, there's the menu.
What's that?
The menu, consistent.
Yeah. And so we had a consistent layout within the menu and the options, and then also we had we decided upon a standard with the weekly modules, which would give them an idea that they click on the weekly module, they go into the week that was there. Within that week, they'd have it all laid out, all the activities that they would need to do, the assignments that need to be turned in. Within Blackboard itself, all the assignments that had dates would show up in their calendar so that they'd be able to go in and look it up. We had a few problems with discussions at first, but that's going to get resolved itself. But then also the consistency to assist with faculty as well. They had a lot to manage. They have to log in, they have to do grading, especially in the hybrid. It's important that week to week they needed to get the feedback as soon as possible, because for the students to continually move on through the course, they can't 2 weeks or 3 weeks from the date that they submitted something and then find out that you did something wrong weeks later, because now you can't change the course of it. The ship has already sailed. And so we were trying to keep the consistency in that as well. And
interrupt just really quick. One thing I wanted to point out with the consistency and with all the courses, that course competencies document, which Dave showed you a little bit ago, is in every course. So the students click on that and they know what the competencies and sub-competencies for that course are. They know exactly what they're going to do. The rubrics, too, for everything that they turn in, every discussion board, every assignment that they turn in, they can click on the rubric before they've turned in their work and know what they are supposed to do and where they will gain and lose points, which was another little bit of a sticking point with some law professors who aren't used to that. Yes?
Janelle, I'm wondering, do you track on Blackboard, do they read it? Are they going into the course competencies and?
Yeah, we started to go that route where you can track clicking, you know, how many clicks on that, and we thought, okay, that's a lot of data at this point, you know, so that's a hill that we're going to fight later on, but it's not something that we wanted to do. I think it's a good idea because you can tell, but then when you get that data and say, now I can tell, what can you do about it if 80% of them aren't reading? You know, so.
And I think that's my question.
Yeah.
We want to tell our students what the competencies are, what's expected of them, but I don't know if it's just in Blackboard, are they looking at that?
Yeah, and that's why if your assignments align with the reading and the lecture and your discussions do, if you can't tell one way, you should be able to tell other ways. So if they do terrible on their discussions, more than likely they didn't read.
We know anecdotally that they looked at the rubrics. They were very, paid a lot of attention to the rubrics.
And the way we wrote out the assignments language has bullet points that match the rubrics. So we just took the rubric language, pasted that into the assignment verbiage, and we said, if you do these things that are bulleted there, because we didn't want to hide the ball. You don't want to make things different. They don't want to have to look at a rubric, because I've been in courses where the rubric looks way different than the requirements. It's like, which one do I do? And so we were very intentional of they both better match. And then Janelle was mentioning too the competencies. You know, somebody was asking me yesterday, how do students know what's going to be on the final exam? And we always tell them, and the professors have been telling them, just go to the competencies. That's what's going to be on the exam. There's no hiding the ball. We're not going to put anything on the exam that we didn't tell you is in the competency. Sorry, Jen, go ahead.
Yeah.
That's fine. So usability, from an IT standpoint, every time we do a project like that, we try to go to the fact that usability is a big concern. Sure, we can design it, we can have consistency, but if how we lay it out and everything else isn't usable, it's going to be hard to continually get them to adopt it or try to navigate it. I mean, in that we had some issues where one of the courses ended up laid out slightly different, and they liked the layout of that better because they could more easily get into discussions. And so there's been conversations as to maybe that the other layouts in the menus worked better, even though there was all but one consistent thing that was changed. Maybe that the other menu options were more usable. And so those are the types of things that we're always trying to make sure. We're always trying to also match up accessibility, make sure accessibility is part of not only the LMS, but part of the design so that everybody has access to it, no matter if it's a disability or if it's just a matter of having access to what they need to at the time. Part of the hybrid is that they have the ability to do their work when it is convenient for them. They're working professionals, and that it might be 2 o'clock in the morning, or it might be something that they have to do while they're on the road traveling because that's part of their job. And so we tried to make it so that it was accessible no matter where. And
as far as accessibility too, we kind of debated, do we open up the whole course? What if they work ahead? God forbid. You know, and so we just opened up the whole course. If you want to work into week 8 and you're more than likely,
they didn't do that.
They did. but we thought you're not going to have time, you're going to have to do the reading, but there were a few students that did work ahead, not by 8 weeks, but a week or 2, because they'd get their assignments in early, they'd get their discussions done. So accessibility too was just, let them have it, let it be open. I mean, I know some colleges, I know a few just open them a week at a time, so you can only see the next week. But come on, we're all adults. If I know I'm going to be gone on vacation, why not let people work ahead of it?
Manageability is also a big thing with the fact that we needed adjuncts, we needed faculty to be able to manage their courses, and what that means is that they can do what they need to, with the idea that in IT we're always trying to make sure they can't do something that they shouldn't as well. But you know, what does that mean? And so we try to meet with the faculty. We had a lot of discussions. I mean, within some of the different roles and responsibilities in Blackboard, there's like 200 to 300 different rights and policies that we can change. We tried to balance it out with the fact that, like, bulk delete was one of the first things I turned off, with the fact that I never really wanted anybody to accidentally bulk delete, because that could have been really traumatic. But then at the same time, we needed people to be able to log in and access it. And then there was some of the courses where, well, we want adjuncts to be able to send out notices, but we've already designed the course. We can't have them changing content in the middle of it. So there was a balance that we had to find. And part of that was just working with the different groups, discussing what the options were, and then kind of managing some of the responsibilities as it moved along. So. Yeah, from the technology standpoint, requirements and recommendations, we met with everybody, and we discussed the different requirements to try to figure out the best means to deliver the course. It's more than just the LMS. It's a lot of the considerations come down to the fact that IT wants to be able to support it, and we have a lot more students that have a timely manner, and they're all at a distance. So how can we provide these tools to them and then still provide support if something breaks, or if they just need assistance, or they're not sure on what to do? Because a lot of the coursework that they had, they didn't have a lot of time to get it done. And so we tried to come up with ways that we could design it based on the requirements that were there and the recommendations that were kind of made. Security is always a big thing. We want to protect the data that's there, protect the rights of the students, and trying to get access rights. Part of that is our adjuncts at the school had never had Mitchell emails or any kind of Mitchell access. They came in, they taught, and they left. As students might email them at their own like law firm address or different things like that. But we put an end to that. We gave all the adjuncts email addresses, because that's what we also required for them to log into Blackboard to get access. But then we tried to funnel all that communication through that as well. So it was a security thing that kind of helped out, but then it was also it allowed for them to kind of manage the traffic as far as the communication with the students. Training was a big thing, because we needed to train them, and we needed to train the students, we needed to train the adjuncts, we needed to train the faculty, we needed to train the faculty admins. We also then needed to train IT and librarians and everybody, because this was a totally different thing. This was different than what we had done before. And part of what we were also trying to do is make sure that in this training that people learned how to do it, but then there was a consistent message like amongst each other. So it wasn't a matter of, oh, who does that, or or that trying to point fingers and different things like that too. And that was also part of the support. We needed to try to find a way to support it in a unified manner, so that we didn't have these knee-jerk reactions. The hybrid program was a big deal. The program started, and oh my goodness, something wasn't working. Well, a bunch of us would either try to fix it, and 3 of us trying to fix it at the same time, that's a problem, or that maybe it's not something that should be fixed. Maybe it was something that should be discussed before it all of a sudden gets changed. And so we got together and figured to move things through our IT ticket tracking system, and we brought the librarians in, and Dave has access to it too, where all the tickets and requests all get funneled through that, so that we can track what we're doing. And then also that becomes meaningful later, so that now as we're designing the courses, we have a better understanding for, oh, this is what we actually changed in that course. This is why we did it, and who did it, and for the different steps that go into it, so we can recreate those as well. So.
In addition to the online part, we had to help design the in-person weeks. And I have just a really short video to show you on the prep week to give you a little bit of a flavor of what happened.
I can't help but think that I wish that I could have learned law the way you're going to learn it. This program is going to be terrific, and I'm so excited for you. Monday, January 12th was a historic day for William Mitchell College of Law. 85 students came to Mitchell to begin their first week of the law school's hybrid program, the first of its kind J.D. degree program for an ABA-approved law school.
An exhilarating, daunting, overwhelming, exciting experience.
So I'm excited. I think it's where higher learning in general is going to be going.
Obviously you're going to be a little nervous with any new change, but I'm excited and for the adventure, you know.
The ABA didn't hand out approval for the hybrid program on a whim. They required a law school with rigor, high standards, and guarantees that the students and Mitchell would be held accountable. Hybrid students spend about half of their instructional time in the online environment, and the other half immersed in intensive, on-campus, face-to-face learning. This week was their first on-campus learning opportunity.
It's been exciting, but it's also been really overwhelming, and I'm looking forward to kind of getting into a groove and finding how to work it all in.
Yeah, I think it's great that there's a lot of really motivated people from all over the U.S.
For many students, choosing Mitchell was all about access.
I think that the hybrid program offers people who might not be a traditional law student the opportunity to pursue a career.
This just provided me the great opportunity to go to law school and work at the same time.
And so the hybrid program is really perfect for me because I can still keep my children involved in their activities. I can still keep my son in the therapy that he's been in for 5 years, and I can pursue a law degree without having to completely restructure my life.
The hybrid program reinforces Mitchell's mission of providing an innovative, practical, and accessible legal education. The law school and its hybrid students have been called pioneers, blazing a trail for a new way to study the law while meeting the needs and technology of the 21st century.
We have to have more options than just being traditional.
An opportunity you can't pass up.
I'm loving it. It's great here.
So, like I said, in addition to the online world, we had to design the in-person world. And not just for Prep Week, but also for Capstone Week. And part of that was making sure that IT and the library, we had our own 2-hour session. And we also had to be strategically placed to assist with any...
Be stationed in the classroom, outside the classroom, pretty much the whole time they were there. Especially Prep Week was worse scheduled. That we looked at it and we were like, when did they get to go to the bathroom? Like, that's down the hall. So we tried to hang out as much as we could, anywhere we could, to answer any questions as fast as we could. We didn't have time for anything else. So.
Getting away a little bit from designing, then we're going to talk about how we oriented all these different groups. And first of all, the students, the most important group. One of the common complaints about online education is that students don't feel part of a larger organization or community. So it was very important to us that we build a community for them so that they felt part of the Mitchell community. And one of the ways we did this was we actually built what's on Blackboard called a community. And we gave them access to it as soon as they put their deposit down.
Pretty close.
And it had basically a 3-pronged function. Number one, to get them to build community with themselves and with the various departments that they would have interaction with at the school. If you can kind of see, if I can, bring it down here, is there's a link over here for each department, academic programs, academic achievement, etc. So that would get them to know the people in those various departments. So that was one thing we wanted to do. We wanted to get them used to using Blackboard in a low stakes or no stakes position so that they could sort of by osmosis learn how to use the learning management system that they would use in their courses. And so we also had a tour of Blackboard in there and a quiz that they had to submit and an assignment that they had to submit. Various things that we told them they had to do to learn how to use Blackboard.
Yeah, there was discussion boards set up.
And the part of the establishing the community was a discussion board that we created for them. And they were extremely active on the discussion board in this community. It was really gratifying. There's over, 300 posts in the Getting to Know You forum on the discussion board. They became friends in this online community. There were students offering, because some of our students live in the Twin Cities, and they were offering their homes for other students to stay in during prep and capstone weeks. So the community was a very important part of building a community for these online students. We also set up various mentor and I guess we call them navigator programs. Each hybrid student was connected with a professor or staff navigator who, I had 4 navigatees and I took them out to lunch when they came for prep week. I emailed them several times during the program to see how they were doing and if they needed any help. Also in the community, I sent out an announcement every week saying, here's what's going on this week, here's some things you need to do, here's who to contact if you have questions. So I got to be very intimately involved with these students as part of letting them know that they were a part of our community even if they weren't physically on campus. So for non-students, orienting them, is that you? Oh.
Yeah, so we had to orient also faculty. And I think the biggest hurdle I had to overcome with teaching faculty is the mindset that they are no longer the star of the show. They're a facilitator, they're a guide. It's not them up in front being the guru. They're helping design the course, they're putting their wisdom into the course. And we had to overcome this barrier that said, you need to establish an online presence. And that's very hard. How many of you have tried to do that? I mean, sometimes you do well, sometimes you fail. But we said, you know, if you're going to go in a ditch, over-communicate. Here's some best practices. Here's how to really get to know some of your students. Here's how to get in on the discussion boards. And so we created some mock courses that we got the instructors or the professors to come into. I put an announcement out for students. Any student want to come, your professor will be there. We might even be able to finagle you an extra point or two, no promises, to be guinea pigs. And so we got together in a room with about 8 students and the instructor, and they just started using the LMS, the Blackboard. The professor would grade some of their stuff. They would get their feedback. They would write to the professor. So it was kind of training the faculty. At the same time, the faculty wanted to know what the students were seeing on their end. Because in Blackboard, you have to switch from student view to faculty view. You never really get to see. So it's a good opportunity for faculty to go over to a student's computer and say, that's not on my screen. Well, no, that's what they're seeing. And so that helped a little bit too. Adjuncts was a whole other ball of wax, as some of you might know, but we had to bring all of the adjuncts in and talk about what are some best practices, what are some good things to do, what are some things not to do. How do you manage the discussion boards? We try to tell them to give feedback as quick as you can, because in the online world, you know, as 48 hours, 72 hours, and an adult learner turns something in and doesn't hear anything, they want to know why. And so we try to tell them, be timely, be consistent, and then also how to do inline grading. That was a whole other thing faculty and adjuncts haven't done before. So in Blackboard, you can bring up the assignment that they're submitted, and you can mark on it on the computer with red lines and comments and all this stuff. And then the rubric will pop up right next to the paper. So as you're going through the paper as an adjunct, you're clicking on the rubric. It's a clickable rubric. So you can say distinguished, proficient, non. It adds up the scores for you. And the adjuncts were very impressed with that because it didn't take much time to grade a paper like it used to. Other supporting roles besides faculty?
Yeah, we had to orient, as Chad alluded to earlier, all the staff, all the admins, and the librarians actually ended up doing a lot of things that they had never done before, the reference librarians in particular. So it was sort of an expansion for us of what it means to be a reference librarian. We had one librarian editing courses for content. One of our librarians is now our copyright expert. A couple of them are really working hard on regulatory issues. And one of our librarians adjuncted one of the courses. And then as I said, I designed the community. I sent out the weekly announcements. I helped train the adjuncts, and I'm now actually helping Dave design some of the courses. And then all the IT people and all of the reference librarians are now in on that ticketing system that Chad said, so that we can, if it's a question best directed to a librarian, we can answer it and we know what students are having issues with and what's going on. Yes?
As part of the move to the hybrid course, did you get any additional people?
Pardon?
Did the library get any additional staff?
No, we did not.
So, in order to take on these new roles, what did you all stop doing?
Frankly, this last year, we haven't taught as much on our own. Like, I haven't taught for a long time. There's been some discussion. We actually expanded some of our hours on Saturday because we've got hybrid students who want Saturday access. But we are talking about coming back some of our, on the reference desk, reference hours I'm talking about. So we are talking about coming back on some of those hours. And now we are moving into our favorite part, fire management.
So leave it up to IT to be the gripe list.
No.
But as far as, we got the design in place and we set up the LMS and program goes to launch, and really when it comes down to it, now that we're live, this is all part of the ADDI model. We're starting to evaluate and trying to make changes, but we're also trying to manage changes as we go, and part of that is also managing expectations. We moved to a new LMS. We tried to automate things also within IT so that, you know, take things out and make things less of a burden, but that also changed how things were. We had to try to get faculty to understand they couldn't add or take out students anymore. That all happened automatically, but automatically to someone is not the same as to another person. During the first parts of the semester we did it sooner than later, and other parts we did not. Faculty admins were used to getting an email from the faculty to tell them to take somebody out of the course or add somebody in. And this wasn't just students, this was somebody that was a friend that was going to teach in week 12, which we don't want them in there because from an IT standpoint that's a security problem or different things like that. So we had a lot of different expectations that we had to change. Also transferring to old courses. Some of them had course material that was on the older Lexis Blackboard that we had to move over the course material and set up. And our new Blackboard did some different things, so it looked a little bit different even for those courses as well. And because we had the shiny new LMS, not only did we have the hybrid program, but suddenly we had an adoption rate closer to 60% of the rest of the faculty and staff thought, well, this Blackboard is really cool, I'm going to start using it as well. So not only did we have increased support for the hybrid because of its nature, but then we had all these other classes that now are going to start to use Blackboard as well for their courses. And so we had to figure out how to do that through the whole process. And then getting the information out to the adjuncts. They taught the same courses before. They're trying to log in the old Lexis. They didn't, the emails they provided us because they never checked them, or they have an admin at the law firm check them. They never paid any attention. They go set up their accounts. Now they don't have access to Blackboard. And it's the day before classes start and different things like that that we had to do. And also then to provide logins and such. They would, certain adjuncts would contact us and they just want us to have their administrator handle it. And we're trying to tell them that you were the one hired. We don't want to hand this email and password out to anybody. And different things like that. So it's all these different expectations that we had to manage. The adjuncts themselves and different problems that we ran into, we tried to fix those problems as we went along. But then part of that, we tried to coach some of them to, this was new to them, and so part of that is it's scary, right? And so we're trying to also talk to them about the fact that if something didn't work, come talk to IT or send in the ticket, and somebody's going to talk to them to try to work them through it rather than their knee-jerk reaction is the first blame that the technology doesn't work and then try to find a non-tech way of doing it, which doesn't really work in the hybrid as well. And then also to continually state and say that like for them to use the excuse that technology is not working, that just starts to make it seem like there is actually just a problem when in fact maybe it's more of a training thing, and that's commonly what it was. We found that not only the students didn't read some of the instructions, but the faculty and the adjuncts didn't read instructions either, but neither here nor there. What's that?
Should we move on to managing fires with technology?
We're
Yeah.
almost there.
Okay.
But anyway, so we set up the ticketing system to try to triage the problems. We also hired on a 24/7 service to try to answer questions in the middle of the night. Part of the hybrid program is that they can do these classes then. We didn't increase our IT staff as well, and so this was our way of trying to hire out and handle these types of calls. What we ended up determining so far is I think we had 16 calls the whole time, and out of the 16, 8 of them were from faculty, and they were just calling to test to make sure it was working. And so we're not sure that we're going to continue to do it. Yeah.
Did you remind them of Peter and the Wolf?
Yeah. Yeah, and oftentimes they were escalated, so then they got bumped to us in the overnight, and I'm like looking at it, trying to figure out if I should actually do it or not. We ended up with, we had a pretty even split between Macs and PCs. And for the most part, part of that is also, we had designed a lot of it for the PC, and we also accommodated for the fact that we knew that people were going to have Macs as well. And we're an Office 365 campus, and so a lot of our stuff is kind of embedded in that. And we ended up having a few issues where we ended up triaging and fixing those kind of Mac and PC things. Then from a standpoint for bandwidth and even storage space, we purchased our LMS, and we purchased what was recommended to us for a school our size. It would last us a good 3 years. And here we're at the end of our first year, and we're almost out of space, and they're looking to move us to a different hosting facility because we overeat their bandwidth. And so our adoption was good, but we've already found that we were having issues with the fact that we had so many people that were logging in, were eating up their bandwidth, and so we had a few slow responses, especially on a couple of our synchronous, like faculty office hours things, and then and different stuff like that, and then
with students putting out fires, there was always a question of, because we hadn't done this hybrid program before. It was a lot of our professors tried to adopt some of these techniques, but this whole, having half of your time be those intense weeks and then half of the time being online, and we're a little unsure how much work is too much. So that was always a question of, is it too much, is it too little, are we going to recalibrate, that kind of thing. There seems to be a little bit more hand-holding with the hybrid students, and part of that was because we wanted to be responsive and make sure that they had a good experience. And part of it might have been that they just didn't seem as reluctant as the other students to ask for stuff. So they were contacting us a lot. And then from an accommodation standpoint, how do we deal with vacations, illnesses, especially during the prep and capstone weeks, things like that, emergencies. And I just quickly wanted to show a shot of capstone week. So this was the student schedule for capstone week, and that those orange things, that was their free time. So these were intense, and probably looks just like this. These were intense weeks, so there were some fire management things going on there. And so let's move right into how we are planning for the future.
Oh, we're out of time.
From the student point of view, part of our variance with the ABA requires us that students have to have the opportunity to participate in the same extracurricular activities that our bricks and mortar students. So we have to figure out how they're going to participate in moot courts, how they're going to participate on law reviews. Frankly, I think law review shouldn't be that difficult, but law review has its own ideas on how to site check. So our student organizations now, we have 2 members of our hybrid cohort who are now SBA members. So that they provide.
We retrofitted the whole SBA office with a web conferencing suite, and we trained all the ones that showed up, student organizations, on how to do web conferencing, and then offered them their own communities within Blackboard as well.
Our counseling services now have online hours, and then a couple of our hybrid students have already started their own student organizations. Really quickly with the students, we started with, I guess the video said 85 students. We now are at 79. So we're pretty pleased with our retention rate. That's pretty good for an online program. We have a new cohort starting in September or late August, and we believe our max is 96 students from the ABA variance, and we believe we're going to hit that, right?
Right now we're probably going to hit it, but we have students on the wait list.
So yeah, August and September are going to be fun. And then we didn't talk much about, I think we talked last year about the student makeup, and it's fairly, well, it skews a little bit older, right? A little bit older, a little bit more male than our bricks and mortar program, correct? Mm-hmm. Most of them have other degrees. Most of them have participated in other online programs. And I guess our new cohort looks fairly similar, except that their predictors are slightly higher.
So predictors are slightly higher, LSAT scores were slightly higher than what we're seeing in our bricks and mortar enrollment.
And faculty, are you going to mention the grade?
At the end of.
Oh, okay. I won't steal it.
Okay. So planning for future technology, Chad, what are we going to do differently?
Quickly, part of it is it's the training, trying to provide training in as many different ways as we can. We provided some online training before. We didn't get a lot of traction. We provided some in-person training before. Didn't get a lot of traction. We're going to try it again, try it in some different ways, and then we're trying to convince some of the administrators to make some of it mandatory. For the students, we're trying to incorporate it into the part of their orientation. This is to trick them into doing orientation without it being orientation, to show them how to do certain things that they're going to do within the course itself. And then trying to figure out how this kind of migrates into the bricks and mortar as well.
Yeah, I was going to talk about the students. for the community and the students, we feel that we need to have sort of more robust tech quiz to make sure that they really do. Although the students themselves, I tried to get a little focus group on how we could change and improve the community for next time, and they're like, oh no, we didn't have any problem with Blackboard, it was fine. So, but we think we need to work on that a little bit. And then I always have the question on how to continue with the community building and how much we should be involved. The hybrid group was very active, they have their own Facebook group and they're very active on that. So a lot of community building is going on there. So we have to decide, well, should we just leave it there or should we try to encourage more on our Blackboard community? Because after prep week, they kind of left that discussion board, which was so active before. The LMS future?
Part of it is that the bigger part is that stuff that we're finding that's working on the hybrid, we're hoping to also move it into the bricks and mortar. And that has to do with not only the design considerations and everything else, but some of the layouts and also what Dave's doing within the courses themselves. And then also to try to increase more of the options for the online students to have that kind of sense of community within their online area. Have a place where they can have events and they can talk to each other, and also try to not have it so that we're necessarily having to manage it for them, that they can have more of a freer experience doing that, but then not have it so that they have to do it through Facebook if they don't want it to be that it's tied into that part of their life, but it would just be tied into their school life instead.
Future planning for design.
Yeah, the only thing I wanted to mention there, it's kind of interesting now, other faculty who are kind of not for the hybrid program, not for technology, are coming to me, emailing me and said, I heard something about competencies. Can you help me write those? I've heard something about andragogy, can you tell me? And I don't give them the one piece, I give them all 5 or 6, because you can't take one of those things out of the context without a bigger picture. So I always tell them, I'd like to meet with you for an hour and we can talk. I don't have an hour. Well, we're going to talk, it's like being in the back of a cop car. You come easy or you come hard, and that's not from experience. Well, but I tell them, I'll meet with you, but we have to talk about all 5, A, B, C, D, because if you're just interested in competencies and you're not doing the other things, you're really not going to get the full effect. And the few people I have met with, faculty people, they're like, where has this been all my life? And I said, it's been there since the 70s. None of this is new, none of this is groundbreaking. And so there's a handful of people that are saying, I want to do this in my traditional course as well. So I think we're seeing success there.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I think in general, we're all experiencing sort of better communication with our faculty.
Yeah.
And the professors who taught in hybrid were generally, now that the first semester and their grades are back and their finals have been graded, were generally really pleased. They said that they couldn't tell the difference between a bricks and mortar student exam and a hybrid student exam. And sort of really forcing all of us to think more critically and with more purpose about what we teach and what our students need to learn. Yes, Ken?
Question for Dave. Dave, when you were interviewed or at some point in the process of taking this on, first of all, I want to congratulate all of you, I think.
Thank you.
Not only on your program back home, but on delivering to us such a clear and concise explanation of what you've been doing and giving us a takeaway of what we can take back. But Dave, were you specifically told, or had you learned on your own, that law professors in general do not have any formal training in educational theory or teaching?
It was both. I was told and I experienced some of that. Yeah. Yeah, so it was a both and.
I think I told you, didn't I?
Yeah, a few people kind of gave me anecdotal stuff, so I had some preconceived ideas. But at the same time, I thought lawyers, stuffy, and I mean, the 2 people that I worked with to create torts and criminal law, very good, very open to the process, and I think that's part of the Mitchell culture, is from the president or dean on down, basically told people, you need to get on board with this and support it, or there's the door kind of thing. So when I heard that at my interview, I thought, good, they're supportive, whether forced or not, they're supportive, and the people that I worked with were very supportive of it. I mean, Mike Steenson, the torts professor, I think he's been at Mitchell, 30-some years, didn't know computers very well, didn't know, any of this LMS stuff, and by about week 3, he's sending out announcements, he's grading, he's doing all this stuff, and it's just like, wow, I wish I had 10 people that were that receptive.
He was the only one that showed up for our
training.
trainings.
Yeah. Yeah. So
You had no problem trying to shame the rest of the faculty?
no, no, he would
It's
do
being recorded, right?
online office hours. He would sign in at night from his home in Blackboard and say, anybody want to join me? 4 or 5 students would
He
join.
used to have a screenshot. He was at home and he had like his baseball
A hat with a small light, it looked like a bunker, like he was hiding bright light. You
And the
gotta kinda,
students
We're gonna
loved
work on
it.
yeah, they loved it.
You gotta work on the etiquette stuff though, so you don't look like a bomber.
Yes, have you heard of any other law schools following your lead and trying to set up a program like this?
I have not, but they probably wouldn't contact me. So that doesn't mean that they're not out there.
Usually what I hear at summit conferences is that it sounds like a really good idea.
They're waiting to
They
see
can't
if
get, they don't know that
we
they can
flop
get
or not.
faculty to
Yeah.
do it, so, right,
Yes.
yes, sir.
So 2 quick questions. One, do you have a hybrid tuition for these students?
A reduced, you mean?
Well, I mean, is it
It's
somewhere
the
between
same-
in-state, out-of-state?
It's the
Is it
same
all-
as the bricks and mortar.
Okay. And then second is career services. How, with folks who live in Utah?
Yes,
Yeah, work
that
with
is one of the things that.
I actually have something to do today to assist with that. We have part of our network and outreach is for the career services. They have a community online. We've taught them and trained them how to use our Skype for Business so they can meet with them individually. They're having some of their sessions that are being recorded and also live sessions that they can tune into that other students can. And then part of the network that we have is a list of people that are in different areas of the country that they can contact for that purpose. Yeah. We couldn't start it until like, I think it was next week, I think was when we came, yeah.
Jason.
Oh,
Yeah, sorry, yeah, the project management of the building and designing, how was that organized through Gantt charts, or like, how did you end up doing that?
We use a design document for everything. So that design document I showed you, it's like an 18-page document with all the weeks on it. And basically, I just met, I did SME interviews for about 5 or 6 weeks where I just went in and talked. I mean, I like interviewed them. What are you thinking of this? And I'm just jotting notes down, adding to that design document. I would send it back to the professor. What do you think of this? Oh yeah, but you missed this or missed this. So we added to it, and this design document kept growing and growing, and it's never done. And so that was kind of how we designed the course. And all within that document is a project management kind of way of doing things. You know, let's start with the objectives and then move over to the right. And if anybody's interested, it's not copyright. I'd be glad to send you a blank if you want.
Please do.
If you want to give me a card or an email.
or we can post it online.
Yeah, I could do that. I mean, I created it years ago, and I've used it for probably almost 12 years now in designing courses, and it works. I'm very pragmatic. You know, if it works, keep doing it, and it works from their point of view. Now, some professors don't like using it. Some would like just scratch on notes, and then they would send me something or an email, but then I'd always take that and paste it in. So I have this document. I have 26 versions of torts and like 17 versions in criminal law because it's always being updated. But I'd be glad to send it to you. It's just a blank. I mean, it's just columns and rows. It's nothing. It's not rocket science. But
You just kind of just check off things as it's actually finished and completed?
Then I have what's called a SME deliverable schedule, and I can send you that too. It's 13 things. So when I go to meet with a faculty person, they say, what do I have to do for this? You know, is there 80 things? I said, if you can do these 13 things, I'll be happy. So I hand them this. They're like, I can do this. And so it's steps, and it's dated. And then in the middle of it, we have a midpoint review, so there's accountability. So I get together with the professor and one of the deans or one of the directors of the program. So they're accountable at the midway point to have stuff done. And if they're not, there's, you know, so it's not me that has to play the bad guy. I let somebody else do that because I have to work with the professor for the rest of the weeks to get this done. So I always like it when somebody else is the bad guy and I can be the guy with the white hat. Yeah.
Could you post it with the presentation
Yeah.
to the Cali site?
Yeah.
Yeah.
We can do that.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Yes.
Yes. Who was?
I think she was first. Go ahead.
First, this was great. I'm so glad I was able to make it to this session. But I was really interested to hear about the exam performance, and I was wondering if you guys have thought about doing any kind of analysis as they move out into the the employment world in terms of how they both perform, the two groups.
We're actually, does the variance or we have hired outside?
We have because we're doing our own, but then we'll have a third party, independent third party who will do also a review.
For multi-year.
Yes.
Okay, yes.
And it will also be comparing the classes. So this first cohort will be compared to the second cohort, and so on. So, yeah.
We should probably wrap it. If there's any other questions, go. You can come up to us after. Or go ahead.
Could you speak to the hybrid, you have to be in, physically present for the prep and the capstone weeks?
Yes.
And that's 50% of?
That's 50% of their hours.
So
their
how did you
credit hours.
handle, very tightly, I mean, life happens.
Right.
How did you handle students who had agreed that they could be available, but?
There were a couple.
They had to make
Make it up.
agreement, they had to, it was sort of like an accommodation issue, they had to make arrangements with all the professors in the program.
Make up the face-to-face time.
So they had to come in anyway?
I don't know how
they
it
did
was-
it, but it was between them and student services and the professor. They worked it out. It's kind of like I'd rather not know. Because to me, it's like I want to measure that. You know, I want to know if they were doing it, and I don't know. But if there's any other questions, let us know. We can stay after for a bit. Thank you very much.